The lantern swung in Lorelei Kensington's hand as she crossed the yard toward her barn. The July heat of 1878 still radiating from the earth even though midnight had long passed, and she could hear something moving inside where nothing should have been moving at all. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pushed open the barn door, the hinges creaking in protest. Stockton, California had seen its share of cattle thieves and outlaws passing through on their way to God knows where, and Lorelei had worked too hard to keep this ranch running after her father's death 6 months ago to let someone take what little she had left. The lantern light spilled across the hay-strewn floor, illuminating a tall figure crouched near the feed barrels, his hands working quickly to fill a burlap sack with oats. "Stop right there," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. She had her father's old revolver tucked into her belt, though she had never actually fired it at a person and prayed she would not have to start tonight. The man froze, then slowly stood and turned to face her. He was young, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes that caught the lamplight like a startled animal. His clothes were worn thin, patched in places and covered in trail dust. His face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp beneath sun-bronzed skin, and when he raised his hands slowly, she could see they were trembling. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "I was not taking much, just enough to get my horse through the next few days." Lorelei should have marched him straight to Sheriff Morrison. That was what any sensible person would do. Instead, she found herself studying him, taking in the way he swayed slightly on his feet, the hollow look in his eyes that spoke of more than just physical hunger. "When did you last eat?" she asked. The question seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised her. He blinked, lowering his hands slightly. "Yesterday morning. Maybe. I am not entirely sure what day it is." She should not have cared. She should not have let the sight of his trembling hands and desperate eyes affect her judgment. But Lorelei had known hunger herself, in those first terrible weeks after her father died and the creditors came calling. She knew what desperation looked like because she had seen it in her own mirror. "There is a water pump outside," she said finally. "Go clean yourself up. I will bring you something to eat." He stared at her as if she had spoken in a foreign language. "You are not turning me in? Not if you do exactly what I say. Go on now, before I change my mind." She watched him walk past her, moving carefully as if afraid any sudden movement might shatter the strange mercy she was offering. When he was gone, she leaned against the barn wall and wondered if she had lost her mind entirely. Her nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. She was alone here with a thief, and she had just invited him to stay on her property. But something in his eyes had struck her, something she could not quite name. It was not just hunger or desperation. It was a kind of bone-deep weariness that she recognized, the look of someone who had been running for too long and did not know how to stop. She went back to the house and assembled what she could spare. Leftover cornbread from supper, some salt pork, and a jar of the preserves her mother had put up before the consumption took her 3 years past. When she returned to the yard, she found him sitting on the edge of the water trough, his hair wet and slicked back, his face scrubbed clean. Up close, she could see he was younger than she had initially thought, probably no more than 24, with a straight nose and a sensitive mouth that looked like it had once smiled easily but had forgotten how. "Here," she said, holding out the food. "Eat slowly or you will make yourself sick." He took the bundle with hands that shook, and she watched him struggle to follow her advice, to not devour everything at once. After a moment, she sat down on an overturned bucket a few feet away, giving him space but staying close enough to talk. "What is your name?" she asked. He swallowed a mouthful of cornbread before answering. "Owen Frost. I am Lorelei Kensington. This is my ranch. Well, it was my father's ranch, but he died last January." "I am sorry," Owen said quietly, and she could hear that he meant it. "What brought you to Stockton, Owen Frost?" And why are you stealing oats from my barn in the middle of the night? He was quiet for a long moment, chewing slowly, his eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance. I was working a ranch up near Sacramento, he said finally. The owner's son accused me of stealing from the cash box. I did not do it, but his father believed him over me. Said if I did not clear out by sundown, he would have me arrested. Did you have any proof you were innocent? No, just my word, and that did not count for much. He looked at her then, really looked at her for the first time, and she saw anger flickering behind the exhaustion. I have been riding south ever since, picking up work where I can, but word travels fast in these parts. By the time I got to Stockton, I had maybe $2 to my name and a horse that was about to collapse. I knew it was wrong coming here, but I did not know what else to do. Lorelei considered this. She had no reason to trust him, but she also had no reason not to. And she needed help on the ranch more than she needed to be suspicious. Can you work? She asked. Real work, I mean, mending fences, mucking stalls, fixing anything that needs fixing? Owen set down the empty jar of preserves and stared at her. You are offering me a job? I am offering you a chance to pay back what you tried to steal. Room and board in the bunkhouse and maybe a little wages if you prove yourself. But if I catch you stealing again, or if you give me any reason not to trust you, I will turn you over to the sheriff myself. Understood. Why would you do this? His voice was rough with something that might have been hope or might have been disbelief. You do not know me. No, Lorelei agreed. But I know what it is like to have everything taken from you and to have nowhere to turn. And I figure everyone deserves one chance to prove they are better than the worst thing they have ever done. Owen stood up slowly, and in the moonlight, she could see his jaw working as he struggled with some emotion he was trying to keep contained. I will not let you down, he said finally. I swear it. See that you do not. The bunkhouse is that building over there. There should be clean blankets in the chest at the foot of the bed. Get some sleep. We start work at dawn. She watched him walk away, carrying his empty dishes, and wondered again if she was making a terrible mistake. But something in her gut told her she was doing the right thing, and Lorelei had learned to trust her instincts. They were about all she had left. The next morning, she woke before sunrise as she always did and found Owen already at work in the barn, mucking out the stalls with a dedication that surprised her. He had found her father's old work clothes in the bunkhouse, and though they were a bit short in the arms, they fit him well enough. He looked up when she entered, his face already sheened with sweat despite the early hour. I figured I should start paying back what I owe, he said simply. Lorelei nodded, trying not to show how much this pleased her. When you are finished here, the west fence line needs mending. I will show you where. They worked together through the heat of the day, and Lorelei found herself impressed by Owen's skill and work ethic. He knew his way around a ranch, that much was clear, and he did not complain even when the sun beat down mercilessly and the physical labor clearly taxed his weakened body. She made sure to bring water regularly and insisted on a break for lunch, watching to make sure he ate enough but not so much that he made himself sick. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Owen worked from dawn until dusk, tackling every task she gave him with quiet determination. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of the main house, and she would go over the books while he repaired tack or sharpened tools. Sometimes they talked, small exchanges at first, then longer conversations as the initial wariness between them began to fade. She learned that he had grown up in Texas, the youngest of 4 brothers, and had headed west after his parents died in a yellow fever outbreak. He had been working ranches ever since, never staying in one place too long, always looking for something he could not quite name. He had a way of talking about the land that showed real affection, and he could fix just about anything with nothing more than baling wire and determination. In turn, she told him about her father, about how he had bought this ranch 20 years ago with dreams of building something lasting, about how her mother had died slowly and painfully while they watched helplessly. She talked about the loneliness of being a woman alone in a place where most people thought she had no business trying to run a ranch by herself. "They keep waiting for me to fail," she said one evening, watching the sun set over the distant hills. "The banker, the other ranchers, even the shopkeepers in town. They all think I should just sell and move back east to live with my aunt in Boston." "What do you think?" Owen asked, threading a new leather strap through a bridle buckle. "I think this is my home. I think my father would want me to keep fighting. And I think I would rather die than let them be right about me." Owen looked at her then, really looked at her in the fading light, and she felt something shift in the air between them. "They are fools if they do not see how strong you are," he said quietly. The words stayed with her long after they had said good night, warming her in a way that had nothing to do with the summer heat. As July turned to August, Owen regained the weight he had lost, his face filling out, his movements becoming more confident. The haunted look began to fade from his eyes, replaced by something lighter, something that made Lorelei's heart beat faster whenever she caught him watching her across the yard. She knew she was developing feelings for him, feelings that were dangerous and foolish and utterly inappropriate given that he worked for her and had nearly been arrested not 3 weeks ago. But she could not help the way her pulse jumped when his hand accidentally brushed hers as they worked together, or the way she found herself looking for excuses to spend more time with him. One afternoon, while they were working to repair the roof of the chicken coop, Owen suddenly spoke. "I have been thinking about what happened in Sacramento," he said, hammering a nail into place with more force than necessary. "About the owner's son who accused me." Lorelei paused in her work, waiting for him to continue. "I think he did it because I caught him mistreating one of the horses. Beat it bloody with a riding crop because it spooked at a snake. I pulled him off the animal and told him if he did it again, I would tell his father." Owen's jaw tightened. 3 days later, money went missing, and suddenly I was a thief. "That must have been terrible," Lorelei said softly. "Having your reputation destroyed like that. The worst part is knowing there is nothing I can do about it. No way to prove I was innocent. My word against his, and he is the owner's son." He set down the hammer and looked at her. "You took a real chance on me, letting me stay here. Most people would not have done that. Most people are too afraid of being wrong to take a chance on being right," Lorelei replied. She moved closer until they were sitting side by side on the slanted roof, their legs dangling over the edge. "You have proven yourself, Owen. Every single day since you got here, you have proven that you are a good man. I want to be worthy of your trust," he said, and there was something raw in his voice, something vulnerable that made her chest ache. "You already are," she whispered. Their faces were close now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could count the freckles the sun had scattered across his nose. She thought he might kiss her, hoped he would, but instead he pulled back slightly, his expression troubled. "What is wrong?" she asked. "I have nothing to offer you," he said. "No money, no prospects, no good name. You deserve better than a drifter who was caught stealing from your barn." Lorelei felt a surge of frustration. "Maybe I should be the one who decides what I deserve. Did you ever think of that?" Before she could lose her nerve, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. For a moment, he froze, shocked, and then his arms came around her and he was kissing her back with a desperate intensity that stole her breath. It was not a gentle kiss, not soft or tentative, but full of all the longing and loneliness they had both been carrying for so long. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "Lorelei," he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like a prayer. "I do not care about your past," she told him firmly. I care about who you are now, who you are with me. And if you feel even half of what I feel when I look at you, then we can figure out the rest together. I feel it, he said hoarsely. God help me. I have been feeling it since that first night when you showed me mercy instead of judgment. I have been falling for you every single day, even though I knew I should not, even though I told myself I had no right. Then stop telling yourself that, she said, kissing him again, softer this time, savoring the moment. Stay with me, Owen. Not as hired help, but as a partner. Help me build something real here. Yes, he breathed against her lips. Yes, to all of it. They might have stayed there on that roof forever, lost in each other, if the sound of approaching horses had not broken through their haze of happiness. Lorelei pulled back, shading her eyes against the sun, and felt her stomach drop when she recognized the two riders coming up the road. That is Sheriff Morrison, she said, climbing quickly down from the roof. And that looks like a man from Sacramento with him. Owen's face had gone pale, but he followed her down and stood at her side as the horses drew up to the house. Sheriff Morrison was a big man with a gray mustache and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. The man with him was younger, well-dressed in a town suit and expensive boots, with slicked-back hair and a sneer that made Lorelei dislike him instantly. "Afternoon, Miss Kensington," the sheriff said, tipping his hat. "Sorry to disturb you. This here is Gerald Hutchinson from up Sacramento way. He is looking for a man who used to work for his father, fellow by the name of Owen Frost. You would not happen to have seen anyone by that description around these parts, would you?" Lorelei's mind raced. She could feel Owen tense beside her, could practically hear him preparing to run or fight or both. But she had not come this far, had not fought this hard to keep her ranch and her independence, only to give up the man she loved without a fight. "Why are you looking for him?" she asked, keeping her voice level. Gerald Hutchinson spoke up, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "He stole from my father. $300 from the ranch cash box. We have been tracking him for weeks." "That is a lie," Owen said, his voice low and dangerous. "I never stole anything from your father, and you know it." "Owen," Lorelei said quietly, putting a hand on his arm in warning. To the sheriff, she said, "What proof do you have of this theft?" "The money went missing the same day Frost left town," Hutchinson said. "What more proof do you need?" "Actual evidence would be a start," Lorelei replied coolly. "Timing is not the same as proof. Did anyone actually see him take the money? Were there witnesses?" The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "Well, no, but given the circumstances, you have a man's word against another man's word, and no real evidence of any crime," Lorelei interrupted. "Is that about right, Sheriff? Now, Miss Kensington, I understand you want to give folks the benefit of the doubt. But, no buts, Sheriff. Either you have proof that Owen Frost committed a crime or you do not. Which is it?" Hutchinson's face was turning red. "Are you calling me a liar?" "I am calling you a man who has made an accusation without any proof to back it up," Lorelei said calmly. "And I am telling you that Owen has been working on my ranch for nearly a month now, and in that time, he has shown himself to be honest, hardworking, and trustworthy. I have had no cause to doubt his character." "He probably stole from you too," Hutchinson sneered. "Have you checked your cash box lately?" "I do not keep a cash box, Mr. Hutchinson. I keep my money in the bank in town, where it earns interest and cannot simply go missing without explanation. Perhaps your father should consider doing the same." The barb hit home. Hutchinson's face went from red to purple. "You have no idea what you are talking about. You are just some woman playing at ranching who has been taken in by a smooth-talking thief." Owen moved forward, but Lorelei's grip on his arm tightened. "I think you need to leave my property now, Mr. Hutchinson," she said, her voice hard as iron. And unless you come back with actual evidence of a crime, I expect you to leave Mr. Frost alone as well." Sheriff Morrison shifted in his saddle, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. "Miss Kensington, I appreciate your loyalty to your hired hand, but if Mr. Hutchinson presses charges, then you had better make sure those charges will stand up in court," Lorelei said, "because I will testify on Owen's behalf, and I will make sure everyone knows that this so-called theft has no evidence to support it beyond the word of a man with questionable character." "How dare you?" Hutchinson sputtered. "I dare because I have nothing to lose by telling the truth," Lorelei replied. "Can you say the same, Mr. Hutchinson? Or are you afraid that a real investigation might turn up some uncomfortable facts about what really happened to that money?" The implication hung in the air like smoke. Hutchinson's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Lorelei thought he might lose his temper entirely. But the sheriff cut in before things could escalate further. "All right, that is enough," Morrison said firmly. "Mr. Hutchinson, unless you can provide me with some actual evidence, I cannot arrest Mr. Frost based solely on your say-so. Miss Kensington here is a respected property owner, and her word carries weight. If she vouches for him, that counts for something." "This is ridiculous," Hutchinson spat. "You are all in on it together." "I think you should go back to Sacramento," the sheriff said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "If you come up with any proof, you bring it to me, and I will look into it properly. Until then, I have got actual crimes to investigate." Hutchinson glared at them all for a long moment, his eyes lingering on Owen with pure hatred. "This is not over," he said finally. "Yes, it is," Owen said quietly. "You framed me because I threatened to tell your father what kind of man you really are. You are a coward and a liar, and deep down, you know it. That is why you cannot let this go, because seeing me free reminds you that you are the real thief." For a second, Lorelei thought Hutchinson might actually pull a gun. But the sheriff was watching him closely, and after a tense moment, Hutchinson jerked his horse's head around and galloped off down the road, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Sheriff Morrison looked between Owen and Lorelei, then shook his head slowly. "I hope you know what you are doing, Miss Kensington." "I do, Sheriff, but I appreciate your fairness in this matter. Just do not make me regret it," he said, then tipped his hat and rode off after Hutchinson. When they were alone again, Owen let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since the riders first appeared. "You did not have to do that," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "You could have let him take me, could have stayed out of it entirely, and let them railroad you for a crime you did not commit? Not a chance." Lorelei turned to face him fully, taking both of his hands in hers. "I meant what I said, Owen. I know who you are, and I trust you completely." "He was right about one thing," Owen said bitterly. "This might not be over. Hutchinson strikes me as the type to hold a grudge." "Then we will deal with it together," Lorelei said firmly. "I am not afraid of him, and I am not going to let him take you away from me. Not now, not ever." Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, but she did not complain. She could feel the rapid beating of his heart against her chest, could feel the fine tremor running through him as the fear and adrenaline began to fade. "I love you," he said into her hair. "I know it is too soon, and I know I should not say it, but I do. I love you, Lorelei." "It is not too soon," she whispered back, tears stinging her eyes. "And I love you too. I think I have loved you since that first night, when you could have run or fought, but instead you stayed and let me make my own choice about what to do." They stood there in the yard, holding each other as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, and Lorelei felt a sense of rightness settle over her like a warm blanket. This man, this moment, this choice, it was all exactly what was supposed to happen. Over the following weeks, They worked the ranch together with a new sense of partnership and purpose. Owen's name might still be under a cloud up in Sacramento, but in Stockton, people began to see him as Miss Kensington's right-hand man, the fellow who had helped her turn the struggling ranch into something viable again. The banker stopped giving her pitying looks. The other ranchers began to include her in their discussions about water rights and cattle prices. And slowly, the community came to accept that Lorelei Kensington was not going anywhere. In September, Owen took his small savings and rode into town, returning with a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. He proposed to Lorelei in the barn where they had first met, getting down on one knee in the hay while the horses looked on with disinterest. "I am still a man with nothing but what I can earn with my own 2 hands," he said, holding out the ring. "But those hands are yours if you will have them. My strength, my loyalty, my love, all of it is yours, Lorelei. Will you marry me?" She said yes before he even finished speaking, pulling him up and kissing him while tears of joy streamed down her face. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Stockton, with Sheriff Morrison standing up as a witness and half the town in attendance. It was not a fancy wedding, but it was real and true, and when Owen slipped that gold band onto her finger, Lorelei felt like the richest woman in California. They spent their wedding night in the house that was now truly theirs, and Lorelei discovered that Owen's gentleness and patience extended to every aspect of their relationship. He treated her like something precious, something worth savoring, and she fell even more deeply in love with him as they learned each other's bodies and hearts in the darkness of their room. The months that followed were not easy. Running a ranch never was. There were droughts and sick cattle, broken equipment and unexpected expenses. But they faced it all together, and somehow that made even the hardest days bearable. Owen proved himself to be not just a good worker but a brilliant manager, with ideas for improving their operation that Lorelei never would have thought of herself. By the time winter arrived, they had not only paid off her father's debts but actually made a small profit. In January of 1879, exactly 1 year after her father's death, Lorelei realized she had missed her monthly courses. She told Owen that evening over supper, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. He set down his fork slowly, his eyes going wide. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. But yes, I think so." A smile broke across his face, so bright and joyful that it took her breath away. "We are going to have a baby," he said wonderingly. "Lorelei, we are going to be parents. Are you happy about it?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy?" He pushed back from the table and came around to her side, pulling her up into his arms. "I am more than happy. I am grateful and amazed and so in love with you I can hardly stand it. You have given me everything, Lorelei. A home, a purpose, a future. And now this, a child? Our child." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and she felt the last little bit of worry dissolve. Everything was going to be all right. They were going to be all right. Their son was born in September of 1879, a squalling red-faced infant with his father's dark hair and his mother's stubborn chin. They named him James, after Lorelei's father, and Owen cried when she told him the name she had chosen. He was a devoted father from the first moment, walking the floor with James when he cried at night, changing his diapers without complaint, singing him soft lullabies in a surprisingly good tenor voice. Watching Owen with their son, Lorelei sometimes had to stop and remind herself that this was real, that this life they had built together had started with her catching him stealing from her barn. It seemed impossible that something so beautiful could have grown from such an unpromising beginning, but she had learned that life rarely followed the expected path. When James was 6 months old, a letter arrived from Sacramento. Owen opened it with trembling hands while Lorelei stood at his shoulder, ready to fight whatever new accusation Gerald Hutchinson had dreamed up. But the letter was not from Hutchinson. It was from his father, the ranch owner, and it was an apology. "Dear Mr. Frost," Owen read aloud, his voice unsteady. "I am writing to inform you that my son Gerald has confessed to stealing the money that went missing from our cash box last year. He used the funds to cover gambling debts, then blamed you to avoid facing the consequences of his actions. He is no longer employed on my ranch and has left the state entirely. I owe you a profound apology for believing his lies and for forcing you to leave without proper compensation or a good reference. Enclosed, please find the wages you were owed, plus additional payment for the hardship my son's false accusations caused you. If you ever have need of a reference, I would be honored to provide one attesting to your character and skill. I wish you every success in your future endeavors. Sincerely, Marcus Hutchinson." Owen stared at the letter for a long moment, then at the bank draft that had fallen out when he opened it, a sum significant enough to make them both catch their breath. Finally, he looked at Lorelei, and she saw that his eyes were wet with tears. "I am vindicated," he said, and his voice cracked on the word. "After all this time, people know the truth." Lorelei pulled him into her arms, baby James squirming between them. "I always knew the truth," she said fiercely. "From that very first night, I knew what kind of man you were." "How?" he asked, pulling back to look at her face. "How could you possibly have known?" "Because I saw you," she said simply. "Really saw you, not just what you had done but who you were underneath. And what I saw was someone worth believing in." They used the money from Marcus Hutchinson to expand the ranch, buying another 50 acres and adding a second barn. Word of Owen's vindication spread through Stockton, and any lingering doubts about his character were put to rest. He became known as one of the most honest and hard-working men in the county, and more than one rancher told Lorelei she was lucky to have found such a good husband. "Luck had nothing to do with it," she always replied. "I chose him, and I would choose him again every single day." In 1881, their daughter was born, a small but fierce girl they named Clara, after Owen's mother. She had her mother's blonde hair and her father's brown eyes, and from the moment she could crawl, she followed her big brother James everywhere he went. Owen doted on his daughter just as much as he did his son, braiding her hair with surprising skill and teaching her to ride almost before she could walk properly. The years rolled by, each one building on the last, each season bringing its own challenges and joys. They added more cattle to their herd, planted an orchard on the eastern slope of their property, and built a new, bigger house to accommodate their growing family. In 1883, another son arrived, whom they named Thomas, and in 1886, twin girls completed their family, Mary and Ruth, red-haired and loud and absolutely fearless. Through it all, Owen and Lorelei's love for each other only deepened. They still worked side by side every day, still sat on the porch every evening watching the sun set over their land, still found time to steal kisses in the barn when the children were occupied elsewhere. The ranch that Lorelei had nearly lost became one of the most successful in the county, known for the quality of its livestock and the integrity of its owners. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen took Lorelei back to the barn where they had first met. The children were with a neighbor for the evening, and the two of them stood in the exact spot where she had caught him stealing all those years ago. "Do you ever think about that night?" Owen asked, pulling her close. "About what would have happened if you had made a different choice?" "All the time," Lorelei admitted. "I think about how close I came to turning you in, to letting fear and suspicion override my instincts. And then I think about everything I would have missed if I had made that choice. This life, these children, this love. All of it came from one moment of mercy." "It was not mercy," Owen said, tilting her chin up so she was looking into his eyes. "It was wisdom. You saw something in me that I had stopped seeing in myself. You gave me a chance to be the man I wanted to be, not the man circumstances had forced me to become." "We gave each other a chance," Lorelei corrected. You could have run that night, could have disappeared and never looked back. But you stayed. You trusted me enough to stay, and that took courage. I stayed because I looked in your eyes and saw home, Owen said simply. And I have been home ever since. They kissed there in the barn, the lantern light flickering around them just like it had that first night, and Lorelei felt the circle of their story close perfectly. From desperation to trust, from trust to love, from love to this rich, full life they had built together. It was not the story she had imagined for herself all those years ago when she was struggling to keep her father's ranch afloat. It was better. The years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and holidays, by good harvests and lean ones, by the ordinary miracles of watching their children grow. James became a tall, serious young man who loved the land as much as his parents did. Clara grew into a woman of fierce independence who could outride most of the ranch hands. Thomas developed a gift for breeding cattle, always knowing which animals would produce the strongest offspring. And the twins, Mary and Ruth, brought laughter and chaos wherever they went, inseparable from each other and beloved by everyone who knew them. In 1895, James married a schoolteacher from San Francisco, a kind woman named Helen who fell in love with the ranch almost as quickly as she fell in love with James. They gave Owen and Lorelei their first grandchild in 1896, a boy named Owen James, and when Owen held his tiny namesake for the first time, Lorelei saw tears streaming down his face. "What is wrong?" she asked, though she thought she knew. "Nothing is wrong," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Everything is so impossibly right. 20 years ago, I was stealing oats from your barn because I was too desperate and too proud to ask for help. And now look at us. Look at this family we have built, this legacy we are creating. How did I get this lucky?" "It was not luck," Lorelei reminded him, just as she always did. "It was choice. My choice to see the good in you, your choice to be worthy of that faith, our choice to build something together that was stronger than either of us alone." As the century drew to a close, the ranch that had nearly failed became the Frost family legacy, passed down through generations with pride and care. Clara married a veterinarian and settled on a neighboring property, while Thomas took over more and more of the day-to-day management of the ranch as Owen and Lorelei grew older. The twins both married local boys and built houses on different corners of the property, keeping the family close and connected. On a warm evening in June of 1900, Owen and Lorelei sat on the porch of the house they had built together, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Owen was 52 now, his dark hair liberally streaked with gray, while Lorelei was 48, her blonde hair fading to silver at the temples. But they still held hands as they sat in their rocking chairs, still shared the kind of comfortable silence that only came from decades of deep understanding. "Do you ever regret it?" Owen asked suddenly. "Taking a chance on a thief in your barn?" Lorelei turned to look at him, this man who had been her partner and her love for more than 20 years, and smiled. "Not even for a second," she said. "You were never a thief, Owen. You were just a good man in a bad situation who needed someone to believe in him." "You saved my life that night," Owen said seriously. "Not just from jail or from Hutchinson's lies, but from giving up on myself entirely. I was so close to losing hope, to believing I was exactly what people said I was. And then you showed me mercy and changed everything." "We saved each other," Lorelei said, squeezing his hand. "I needed you just as much as you needed me. This ranch, this life, I could not have done any of it alone. We built this together, every bit of it." As the sun set over the land they loved, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, their grandchildren ran shrieking with laughter through the yard. Their children called them to supper, and the life they had created together hummed around them with contentment and joy. It was a life born from one moment of compassion, nurtured by hard work and deep love, and it would continue long after they were gone, a testament to the power of seeing the best in people even when they could not see it in themselves. In the years that followed, Owen and Lorelei gradually stepped back from the active management of the ranch, content to let their children and grandchildren carry on the work they had started. They spent their time gardening, reading, taking long walks around the property, and entertaining the seemingly endless stream of grandchildren and great-grandchildren who came to visit. Owen never forgot the lesson of that night in the barn, and he made sure to pass it on to his descendants. "Your grandmother saw something in me that I had stopped seeing in myself," he would tell them. "She chose mercy over judgment, trust over fear, and that choice changed everything. Remember that when you meet people who are struggling, who have made mistakes, who need someone to believe in them, sometimes all it takes is one person willing to see the best in you to change your whole life." On a spring morning in 1910, Lorelei woke to find Owen had passed peacefully in his sleep, his hand still holding hers. She was 78 years old and had loved him for 32 years, and the grief of losing him was almost more than she could bear. But as their children and grandchildren gathered around to mourn and remember, she found comfort in the legacy they had built together. At his funeral, she stood before the assembled crowd, this woman who had defied expectations and built an empire from almost nothing, and told them the story of how they had met. She told them about catching him stealing from her barn, about the choice she had made to see his potential instead of his desperation, about the life of love and partnership that had grown from that single moment of compassion. "He was the best man I ever knew," she said, her voice strong despite her tears. "Not because he never made mistakes, but because he never stopped trying to be worthy of the second chance he was given. He taught me that people are not defined by their worst moments, but by what they choose to do after those moments pass. And he loved me with a devotion and faithfulness that never wavered, not for a single day in 32 years of marriage." Lorelei lived for another 5 years, surrounded by family, watching her great-grandchildren grow and thrive on the land she and Owen had fought so hard to keep. When she finally passed in the summer of 1915, she was buried next to Owen under a large oak tree on the eastern slope of the property, the place where they used to watch the sunrise together on the mornings when neither of them could sleep. The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants, who never forgot the story of how their grandparents had met. It became a family legend, told and retold at gatherings, a reminder that love could grow in the most unexpected places, and that mercy was never wasted on someone deserving of redemption. And sometimes, on warm summer evenings, the children playing in the yard would swear they could see 2 figures sitting on the old porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, their love still present in the land they had cared for so faithfully. The barn where it all began still stood, converted now into storage for equipment, but preserved carefully because it was where Lorelei Kensington had caught Owen Frost stealing and chosen to offer him grace instead of judgment, setting in motion a love story that would echo through generations and prove that sometimes the best things in life come from the courage to trust in another person's potential for goodness, even when the world has given them every reason to doubt themselves.